In 2019, I went on a pilgrimage. I was lucky to have been given a sabbatical period with a small stipend, and so I drove my little car down to the northwestern corner of New Mexico, where there is a Benedictine monastery called Christ of the Desert Monastery. And to get there, you have to drive up this winding dirt road up alongside the Chamas River until you get to the place where there's a canyon, and you look up and you can see the tower of the monastery chapel. It's underneath these big sandstone cliffs, and the tower of the chapel, the whole chapel, is the same color as the sandstone cliffs. It's just a beautiful sight. 6,500 feet elevation, so it's high desert, sagebrush and some pinyon pine trees. Just a beautiful place, very remote. And I stayed there 6 days, and so I sort of slipped into the routine of the monks there. There's about 30 monks, and 7 times a day they would do their prayers, just like in a good Benedictine monastery. They would all have their robes on and file into the chapel and sit in their chapel seats and chant the psalms and the rest of the service. It felt like I was sort of going back centuries in time, because monks have been doing this forever and ever. I didn't attend all the services, but one morning I did get up at 4:30 in the morning, and so I could get to the 5 o'clock vigil service, which is an hour long of music and chanting and reading the scriptures. I remember that morning, the snap of the cold air and the gravel crunching under my feet, and the brilliance of the stars overhead and the smell of the sagebrush. Just a really great memory for me. They have a guest house there with very small, simple rooms, a bed and a chair and a dresser, and with a shared bathroom. And they ask that the guests maintain silence at the monastery, except for in the guest house kitchen, where you can talk to the other guests, but no other talking. And the guests are allowed to eat meals with the monks in the refectory, but again, no talking, which is actually not a bad way to eat a meal. And over the 6 days that I was there, I found myself just slowing down. You know, life was simple. No phones, no internet, no schedule except for the liturgy. And so it was time to just be quiet and slow down. I painted some watercolors while I was there, and when I look at them, it brings me back to that time of simplicity. Well, our gospel lesson today is about another kind of pilgrimage, the pilgrimage of the wise men who came to see the baby Jesus. The story says that they were wise men from the east. The actual word is magi, which means astrologers, probably from Persia, somewhere to the east of Israel, which is now Iran. And these astrologers, these magi, were people who would sit at night and watch the stars. So they were very learned in the movement of the stars and the planets. And one day they saw a new star arise in the east. And they knew that this must be something of great importance. And they decided that there must be a birth in the land of Israel where the star was shining. And so they decided that they were going to go on a journey, on a pilgrimage, to see this baby who was born, that was going to become the king of the Jews. Well, of course, the journey from Persia to Israel to Bethlehem is a long journey, and it's been the subject of lots of stories and poems. In 1622, the Anglican priest Lancelot Andrews talked about the wise men in a sermon in a poetic passage on Christmas Eve. He said, "Consider the time of their coming, the season of the year. It was no summer progress. A cold coming they had of it at this time of the year, just the worst time of the year to take a journey, and especially a long journey. The ways deep, the weather sharp, the days short, the sun farthest off, in the very dead of winter. And these difficulties they overcame of a wearisome, dangerous, unseasonable journey, and for all this they came." Well, that was written long ago by Lancelot Andrewes, and then in 1927, the poet T.S. Eliot used those lines in his poem, The Journey of the Magi, and then he added some more lines. "The camels galled, sore-footed, refractory, lying down in the melting snow. Then the camel men cursing and grumbling and running away and wanting their liquor and women, and the night fires going out, and the lack of shelters, and the cities hostile, and the towns unfriendly, and the villages dirty, and charging high prices. A hard time we had of it. At the end, we preferred to travel all night, sleeping in snatches, with the voices singing in our ears." Doesn't sound like a very pleasant journey. But in the end, they persevered and they found the baby Jesus, and they knelt down and worshiped the child, paid the child homage, and offered their gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. So they worshiped the baby Jesus, who they considered to be the rightful king of the Jewish people. Lancelot Andrewes, in his sermon, says that was the object of their pilgrimage, was to worship the child. I find it interesting that they didn't have to have any other proof. They didn't have any trouble believing that this child in a manger, in a stable, in a unknown town, to a poor, unwed woman, young girl, was anything unusual. They didn't have to wait around to see that the child became the king of the Jews. They were satisfied just to see this child that they were sure the star had led them to, and then they departed. T.S. Eliot, in the end of his poem, says that in the end we came back and everything looked different. We had been changed from the old ways, the old dispensation, to a new one. You know, they say that there's a difference between a pilgrimage or a pilgrim and a tourist. You know, a tourist travels to some exciting places expecting to take some photos and see some great things and then come home pretty much as they left. But a pilgrim expects to go to another place and come home changed. Something happens during the pilgrimage which you hope will change you. I'm not going to be the same when I get back as I was when I left. And there's a long history of Christian pilgrimages. Centuries ago, people would make pilgrimages to Jerusalem or to Rome. And in England, the Canterbury Way was a pilgrimage, a way that went from Winchester to the Cathedral at Canterbury. And of course, Pilgrim's Progress is a book written by John Bunyan in 1678. It's a famous allegory about a man named Pilgrim who's making a pilgrimage that leads him in the end to heaven. I have friends who have gone to Spain to hike the Camino, which is a trail about 500 miles long from eastern Spain to Santiago on the coast. And my friends all tell me what a great experience it was. Mostly they say what they remember is the conversations they had with other travelers, other pilgrims on the way, people from all over Europe, all over the world, who come to take this journey. and they stop in hostels and churches along the way, and those are the memories that they bring back. Well, I think that there are all kinds of pilgrimages. A pilgrimage might be as short as a day. Get in the car and drive somewhere else. Spend the day in silence. Watch the waves come in on the beach. Listen to the seagulls. Look at the mountains. There's all kinds of pilgrimages. But the point is to find God, just like the Magi found the Christ child. And you can find all kinds of retreats offered by retreat centers and monasteries, and those can be pilgrimages too. And I think we all take a pilgrimage, a little pilgrimage, every Sunday when we leave our homes and we come here to church. And we worship God, just like the wise men came to Bethlehem to worship the Christ child. We leave behind our usual routines, the housework and the chores, and we get dressed and we come here to this place, holy place, and we spend time listening to God. I think that's a kind of a pilgrimage. And in some ways, our entire life is a pilgrimage. We are taking a pilgrimage from heaven, from earth to heaven. So we journey on with our eyes on the goal.